Thank you very much for inviting me. I apologize for being a little late today. LA's traffic is very unpredictable sometimes, and I apologize. I thought I'll be here by 8:30, but couldn't quite make it. One thing I want to make a comment on is I've been pretty lucky this week. I have a few speeches this week, and a couple of the speeches, including the one that I'm doing today, has a great view at the venue. Today, I see a very great view, looking through the ocean. A couple of days ago, I have another one looking down the mountain, so it was pretty good. Can't complain. A couple other things also. I know a couple of your speakers just mentioned about a couple of things that I probably will cover a little bit, like the legal hotline at the very end. And also I have some information about international buyers as well. So maybe that will cut my presentation a little short. So let's get started. I'm going to talk today a little bit about the economic outlook, talk a little bit about the housing market outlook, and then we're going to go into some regional housing market statistics, and then finally we'll talk a little bit about forecasts and market opportunities. Let me first ask, how many of you actually went to the San Jose event for Annual Expo? A couple of people? Well, in a way, that's good because some of the information that I'm covering today was covered by Leslie Appleton-Young and her forecast, and I'll repeat some of the information, but some of the information in here she has not covered. So I'll have some new information to talk about the economy and also about the housing market. And I know in the morning, usually it's a little tough to digest some of the economic news because the economy is not economics is not necessarily the most fun stuff to look at. So hopefully, maybe spend about 10-15 minutes, not too long, on the economic outlook, and then I'll start looking at start talking about the state housing and economic market. Let's take a quick look at the economy right now. What do you think about the economy right now? Give some feedback. Do you think it's doing okay? It's doing great, or
suffering?
Plugging along.
Plugging along?
Slowly, but sure.
Right, and then we've been plugging along for the last 7 years or so, I think. Since the Great Recessions, as you can see from the red bar right here, that's when we had our Great Recession in 2009, and since then, economists would tell you that usually after the economy has a downturn, we usually have a little bit more robust economic recovery. A little bit more robust mean maybe about 4%, 5%. We haven't been seeing such a robust economy. In fact, for the last few years, we have been seeing only about subpar below 3% increase. Earlier this year, in the first quarter, we actually, and when it was first reported, the first quarter of 2015, actually it was a decline. But then it was revised to 0.6% for the first quarter. Any guess on why the first quarter of this year was kind of slow? Anybody? There could be a lot of factors. It could be because of global economic slowdown. Global economic slowdown is more like what happened in the second quarter or the third quarter. But remember what happened in the end of last year. How much were you paying for gasoline at the pump? Oil? Maybe $4.50 at the mid of last year. But towards the end of last year, prices went down significantly. And how much you're paying right now? Below $3, right? So what happened was at the end of last year.
He's got his Tesla.
Oh, okay, well, maybe that's not the question for you. Now we did have a significant drop in oil prices. Usually, significant drop or decline in oil prices is a good thing for consumers because you pay less. When you go to the pump, you pay less, and you have more money in your pocket, right? That's true, but that's usually a long-term effect. The short-term effect usually is when you have a drop in oil prices, it affects some of the states or some of the areas that produce oil, produce energy. For example, Texas. So we did have some decline in GDP and decline in the labor market because of that reason. When we have a decline in the labor market, of course, few people actually were able to find a job, and few people were able to spend money. And that's hurt the economy a little bit in the first quarter. Also, what happened in the first quarter was a closure of some of our ports, LA and Long Beach, and that actually is because of some of the union strike that leads to the closure of the ports. When we have closure of those ports, usually what happens is we have a decline in international trade. That means we have a negative net export. That again also hurt the economy, hurts the GDP. And that's why in the first quarter, we had a pretty weak first quarter. Second quarter, it picked up a little bit with a 3.9% increase in the second quarter because of the oil prices and energy prices actually climbed up a little bit in the second quarter. It did dip towards the end of the second quarter. In the third quarter, it actually started declining again. But it did climb up a little bit for the oil prices and the energy prices. Also, the ports reopened. We didn't have any more strike, and some of those trades that we did not have in the first quarter moved forward in the second quarter. And consumer spending continued to increase. So that's why the second quarter we were doing really good. And the third quarter, though, which is something that we will have some numbers on tomorrow, I believe they are releasing the preliminary GDP, third quarter GDP release tomorrow. Speculation is, a lot of economists says the third quarter is not doing great, but it's still going to continue to grow. Most likely, it will grow at around 1.5% to 2%. So we'll find out tomorrow. Of course, when you have an economy that's growing, you also want to look at some unemployment figures. You've seen some unemployment figures, you have heard about labor market. Unemployment figures is something that we use to gauge how the economy is doing. That's what the Federal Reserve used to figure out whether they want to raise interest rate or not. Well, that's part of it. But unemployment rate is currently, for September, it went all the way down to 5.1%. Just looking at that one number doesn't necessarily mean much, but if you look at what it was back in 2009, 2010, at the national level it was close to 10% or a little bit above 10%. For the state, it was actually 13%. So it was a lot higher than what we're seeing right now. And for full employment, economists use full employment or a natural unemployment rate as a gauge of how employment or labor market is doing. The natural unemployment rate is right around 5% or so. So we were very, very close. So we have come a long way since 2009, even though it took us 7 years or so, but we've come a long way. But if you take a look at that red line right there, you'll notice that it's consistently about the national number. That's because in 2007, 2008, when the housing market collapsed, we actually got hit harder by the mortgage lending, and of course, we did have higher home prices than the national level. So we got hit hardest, and we're still recovering. But you can see that the gap is actually narrowing, and the reason why we're narrowing the gap is because of stronger labor market improvement for California since 2012. You can see that the red bar right here, they're consistently above that blue line. Why do you think we have stronger labor market in California? The tech industry, right? And of course, we have a lot of high-tech gadgets. 5, 6 years ago, maybe not everyone used a smartphone, but today we have a lot of smartphones. We have a lot of gadgets. We have a lot of iPad. I think Apple just released their earning announcement yesterday. Yeah, so of course they also rely on China as well.
Right.
But we have a lot of tech gadgets. But other than tech gadgets, we also have a lot of companies that promote social media. Many of you use social media, use Twitter, Facebook, right? For your businesses, or for maybe just to communicate with friends. Those are some of the tech things that we have in the tech sector. And of course, the tech sector, a lot of those tech companies are in Silicon Valley. They're in the Bay Area. And of course, Bay Area has been booming. And I'll show you a slide that shows you how different the Bay Area is in terms of economic growth compared to the state. But typically, for the last, I would say about 24 months or so, at the national level, we have been growing at about 200,000 jobs every month at a national level. That's pretty impressive. A little bit of a red flag though for the current month. In September of this year, the report that we just had, it shows that the growth of employment is only about 142,000. So that's a little bit away from what we normally see in for the last 24 months. Also for California, I don't have the number up here, but for California, for the first 7 or 8 months, we have been averaging a growth rate of about 37,000 a month in labor market. But in September, we only grew by about 8,200. So there is a somewhat of a difference. Now, whether that is because of what happened in August or what happened in September when the financial market declined, or people feel a little bit more less wealthy because of the stock market, or whether it is because of the global economic slowdown, we'll have to see, and we'll have to find out and see in the fourth quarter. But here's a slide that shows you what it's like comparing San Francisco or the Silicon Valley or the Bay Area to California. California as a whole, it's growing at 2.8%. But if you take a look at San Francisco and San Jose, they're growing at 4.7%, and with San Diego growing at 3.5% or so. Now, we do have some tech companies in Southern California as well, in Orange County, Irvine, and maybe in San Diego, where we have a little bit of a biotech companies, a few biotech companies. So we do have some growth in the Southern California as well. LA is a little bit weaker compared to some of the other counties in Southern California, but LA also is growing with 2.1%. Part of the reason LA is growing, and actually it's an improvement from previous year. This year it's growing a little bit better than last year partly because of the movie industry. LA has a lot of entertainment businesses. Probably many of you have seen some movies this year during the summer. Maybe Jurassic World, maybe the Avengers, and some of you may be waiting for Star Wars, right? I have a coworker that he's an IT guy, and he put a lot of Star Wars figurines on top of his in front of his desk, and it looks like he's ready to go. So I think it's on sale already, the tickets.
Yeah.
So it's probably going to be a big hit. Again, it's going to help the movie industry a little bit, and hopefully it will help LA as well. And of course, another big factor of how the economy has been growing is because of interest rate. We have had low interest rates for a while, and what is the interest rate right now? Below 4%, right, for 30-year fixed rate?
3.5.
3.5. If you take a look at what happened, let's say 2 years ago in 2013, we had even lower interest rate in the first half of the year, but in May or June something happened and the interest rate spiked up, right? Do you remember what happened back in 2013? Anybody?
The quantitative easing ended, right?
That's right. The Federal Reserve made an announcement saying that they're going to stop buying bonds. They're going to discontinue the bond buying program. And at one point, I think in a period of 2 weeks, it spiked up by about 100 basis points. So it went from like 3.5 to maybe 4.5%. But then it gradually came down, and that's what we have been seeing. And a lot of people actually expected the Federal Reserve to increase interest rate, the Fed funds rate in September, but they did not. And here are some of the reasons why the Federal Reserve did not increase interest rate in September. Partly is because of what happened in August and in September. We did have an economic slowdown. China came out with an announcement on the economic slowdown in their manufacturing sector, but also that also affects the financial market globally. It affects not only China but also the U.S. as well. I think at one point we did have a drop in the stock market dropped from its peak by maybe about 15% or so. So because of that reason, because of the financial meltdown, I wouldn't say necessary meltdown, the financial decline, the financial market decline, the Federal Reserve were a little bit concerned, and so they did not increase their interest rate because they don't want to, by increasing interest rate, it will create some uncertainty for the economy, for the public, and also create some actual burden on some of the emerging market. When you increase interest rate and create some burden, create the cost, increased cost for emerging market, that's going to affect the global economy and as well as the U.S. economy as well. So they did not increase interest rate in September. Now the next time they have 2 more times to increase interest rates this year. I think they're making an announcement today. And then they have another chance to do it in December. Most likely today they're not going to make any adjustment, partly because of what I said earlier, the labor market. The labor market for California and for the nation did not fare very well compared to previous months. So they're not going to increase any raise interest rate. And also, the decisions on rate hike is usually based on 2 things. One is based on inflation, and the other one is based on how the economy is doing, but more likely on labor market. So the Federal Reserve, it's very, very data driven, and they're not going to make any decisions before any GDP number comes out. So, and the GDP number is not going to be ready until tomorrow. So most likely they're not going to do anything today, and very unlikely they will do something in December. So my speculation is they're most likely going to start doing or raising rate in 2016, but that's still questionable because of the fact that we have to see how well we're doing economically in the 3rd quarter as well as the 4th quarter. Okay, so here's a quick snapshot of what we think the economic outlook is going to be for the U.S., and then I have another slide for the state as a whole. For the U.S., for 2015, we expect a 2.4% increase in GDP with a 2.7% increase in GDP in 2016. And non-farm job growth is going to be right around 2% for both this year and next year, with unemployment rate finally dropping below 5%, but for the average of the year in 2016, it's going to be about 5% overall. This year, we don't really have much inflation because of oil prices decline and energy prices decline, but we do expect some inflation in 2016. And disposable income is how much money you have in your pocket. But so this year we expect an increase of 3.3% and a 2.7% next year. Inflation rate, interest rates, 30-year fixed rates. This year, it was a little unexpected. We thought the 30-year fixed rate will be up, but it actually will be down on average to 3.9%. But next year, we do believe that there will be some raise in interest rates by the Federal Reserve. Now here's the California outlook. California, as I mentioned earlier, has been growing faster in terms of the labor market than the nation as a whole. So we do expect a faster growth both in 2015 and 2016 compared to the nation. But unemployment rate, it's still closing the gap. So we're still not quite there yet. It's still going to be about 5%. And disposable income, however, it will be faster than the nation as a whole. So let's talk a little bit about the housing market, the state housing market. Again, I'm going to ask the questions, how do you feel about the current housing market right now? Of course, it might be a little different last few months compared to, let's say, the current month. But what do you think about the current housing market right now?
It's good.
It's good. The sales activities are up. Overall, compared to last year, it looks pretty healthy, right? Economy is actually doing pretty well. It's not robust, as I mentioned earlier, but people are coming out and buying homes. Take a look at this graph here. The state number here, it shows the state number. As far as the first 9 months are concerned, we're up about 7%, 7.3% for the first 9 months of the year. For the month of September, we're up slightly we're up about 7%, 6.9%. we actually thought, okay, last year, 2014, was a decent year in terms of economic growth. 2013 was a decent year in terms of economic growth. We thought 2014 would be a year with a little bit of activities, an increase in activities compared to the previous year. But it didn't pan out as we thought, partly because of, I believe, because of the fact that we have 3 years of home price appreciation, of double-digit home price appreciation. Remember in 2012, I think we have about 10-15%. I don't remember the actual number. But the 2013 we have over 20% increase in home price appreciation. I mean, increase in median price. I shouldn't say home price appreciation, but increase in the state median price. And then another year with 10% in 2014. So the the increase in home prices may have deterred some of the potential buyers, from actually buying home in 2014 or 2013, and partly because they have to save up enough money for a down payment. I'll go into a little bit deeper on that topic very shortly. But in sales, as far as sales is concerned, we're doing very well. For the rest of the year, I think we are still going to increase at a increase on a year-to-year basis by single digit. But I know we might have some sales pull forward in September or maybe in August, partly because of people's anticipation of increase in interest rate. Of course, Federal Reserve did not increase interest rates, but some of the sales might have pulled forward. And also, a topic that's been talked about many times, TRID. We might have some delay because of the disclosure, disclosure implementation. In October, we may be seeing a little bit of slowdown because of TRID, but according to NAR, the transition is probably going to take about 45 days or so. So after that 45 days, things will probably be back to normal a little bit. So if there is any interruptions or disruption to the market, it might be in October, but November and December will probably be back to normal. Here's a quick look at the sales trend that we normally look at. Instead of looking at that volatile month-to-month sales increase or sales trend, we take a look at this particular trend. This looks a little bit more complicated than it should be, but the orange line right there shows a 6-month moving average. Looks like it's going up, and looks like it's going up, and it's actually going up since the beginning of 2014. But beginning of 2014, from the beginning of 2014 to the beginning of 2015, we were still below that 0% line. But since then, you can take a look at right here. This trend line actually shows the sales trend actually has been up since earlier this year. I put a circle right here at the very end. That is what I mentioned earlier. We're seeing a little bit of a leveling off in terms of the sales increase. Now, when I say level off, I don't necessarily mean a decline. I meant the peak. Might have the peak in increase in sales activity growth rate might have already peaked, meaning we may not see a 7 or 8 or 9% increase compared to previous year, but we may see a 3 or 4 or 5% in sales activity for the rest of the year. Now, whether this is a fluke or not, we don't know. We don't know whether it might be because of TRID, I said, or it may be because of people pulling forward some of the sales in August and September. We'll find out a little bit more in October and November and see what the sales trend, whether the sales trend will continue to go up or not. But looking at this graph here probably make you feel a little bit more confident. Now this graph shows household formation. Household formation means, you know, when someone get married or when someone want to form a family, they move out from either their parents' place or move out from their existing household, they form another household. Usually when there is an increase in household formation, we have increase in housing demand. Take a look at the trend right here. Well, for the last 7 or 8 years, going back to 2006, we have very, very low household formation, below 1 million from 2006 to 2014. But look at 2015. We have an increase in household formation. It's projected to be about 1.7 million. And part of the reason for the increase in household formation is because of better economic growth, as I said earlier. And of course, when the labor market is improving, and when people are moving out of either their parents' place or splitting with their roommates and forming their new households, that's when we have new household formation. Judging by the new household formation of 1.7 million, again, this is a national number. Judging by that number, it looks like we are going to have some demand in the housing market. And whether that is going to be in the rental market or going to be in the sales market, that of course we need to look and see. But in the last couple years, 2013, 2014, we did have a pretty good rental market, right? Average rent went up and vacancy rate went down significantly in LA and some of the other areas as well. Part of the reason is because people are forming households, but they're actually moving out as renter rather than buyers. But in the next couple of years, when we have enough people saving up enough down payment, we probably can expect a little bit of increase in the sales activity. Of course, when you have housing demand, you also, and if you don't have enough supply, which I think we don't have enough supply right now, and I'll go over some of the supply inventory slide a little later. But if we don't have enough supply and we continue to have housing demand, what's going to happen? We have some home prices. We have some increase. Exactly. We have some increase in home prices. We have some upward pressure in home prices, and that's what we experienced in the last couple of years with over 10% increase in home prices. This year it slows down a little bit. In September, we actually experienced an increase of 4.3% compared to last year. Earlier this year, we had 6%, 7% or so, but we do not expect this year to end up with a double-digit increase in home prices. In my opinion, in my perspective, I'd rather see a high single-digit increase in home prices rather than 3 or 4 years of double-digit increase consistently. Partly because when you consistently have double-digit increase of home prices for years after years, that could imply overheating of the market. So the fact that it's actually slowing down a little bit to a healthy single-digit increase in home prices, that actually makes me feel a little bit better. And I mentioned going back to, before I move on to inventory, going back to this slide here, someone asked me before, are we seeing some trend of looking at some of the price increase now that we have 3 years of price increases and home prices at 482? Do we expect, or would people think that we're building a housing bubble here as far as home prices is concerned? Well, my answer to them is yes, we did have some significant increase in home prices in the last few years, but it seems to be slowing down. And also, keep in mind, when we had the current price level is 482,000. If you compare that to what happened in May 2007, that's when we hit the peak at the state level. It was 594,000. So compared to what we had back then, we're still 20% below what we had back in 2007. So my answer is yes, we did have some increase in home prices, but I don't think we have overinflated some of the home prices because we're still significantly below what we are. I don't have a chart here, but one of the slides that I have shows the long run trend of home prices, and we're slightly above the long run trend, but we're not far off compared to what we were in 2007. And imagine if we were to increase, let's say, by about 3 or 4% every year for the next 6 years or so, we may be at this point right here. But that's 6 years from now is roughly about what, 2021, and that's about 15 years from when we hit the peak last. So I think it's justified getting back to that level if it's 15 years away from that point. Now, of course, one of the reasons why we have increase in home prices is because of inventory. Any guess of what the normal inventory is in a normal market?
8 months.
6 months.
Close? 6 months. 6.5 months is what we normally have in a normal market. But currently we have 3.7 months. It's actually a decline from last year as well. So as far as how it compares to normal market, we are below the normal market. And I'm sure you guys experience feeling the heat as well, maybe earlier this year, maybe not as much this month, but earlier this year you probably feel the inventory is a little tight in Redondo Beach and some of the other areas in LA as well. But guess what? If you compare that to San Francisco or the Bay Area, it's actually considered pretty good. Back in San Francisco, when we went to Expo last month, earlier this month, someone told me they have an inventory, maybe about 1 month of inventory, 1.5 months of inventory. And if we look at some of the numbers that we report on a regular basis, yeah, most of the counties in San Francisco Bay Area, it's below 2 months. So the fact that we do have a little bit of inventory better than the Bay Area is a good thing, partly because of what I'm going to show here. Now this slide shows you a comparison between the demand and the active listings. And I break it up into 3 regions: San Francisco Bay Area, Southern California, and Central Valley. In San Francisco, as I mentioned, the inventory level is very, very low. So even if we have a 6% drop in active listings, and you can see that we have drop in active listings for all 3 regions, but even with a drop of 6% in San Francisco Bay Area in active listings, it's constraining the sales because we're not seeing any sales increase in the Bay Area. But in Southern California, with a similar decline in active listings, we still see a 10% increase in sales. Of course, that's not going to last forever. If we continue to experience inventory level issues, in a few years, in the next 2 years or so, we probably will see a similar situation as what we're seeing in the Bay Area. So the inventory level inventory level needs to increase. Hopefully, it will increase in the next couple of years or so. But there are a lot of things that we can do, but again, also there are things that we don't have our hands on. Central Valley, even though we have a drop in 4%, we also see an increase in sales. And Central Valley seems to be, and Riverside, San Bernardino also seem to be showing some increase in sales in recent months, partly because they have lower price properties compared to some of the other Southern California counties and Bay Area. And here's a quick look at the counties in Southern California. You can see that for all counties, we're seeing drop in active listings, but we still see some increase in sales activity year over year. So again, we will probably continue to see some sales activity, but inventory level is definitely something that needs to be concerned about. And here are some of the reasons why we're not seeing, we have a constraint in inventory. Many of you probably have already heard about, of course, we don't have as many distress sales as before, obviously. Distress sales level is, we used to have maybe about 60% back in 2009. We have 60% of home sales being distress sales. But today we only have about 5% of sales being distress sales. Of course, because of increasing home prices. But we also have, a couple of years ago, we have a lot of investors. A lot of investors purchased their properties, but they did not flip them around. Instead, they purchased their properties as rental properties. So what happened when you have investors purchasing property as rental properties? They don't put it up on the market, and of course, you have fewer properties to be shown on the MLS. We have fewer new constructions also. The new constructions have not recovered as well, and I will show you another slide later. There are a couple other things also. The very first item is about affordability challenges for not only for first-time buyers, but also for repeat buyers. Some of your clients who are current homeowners, they don't want to put their house up on the market, maybe because of what happened back 2 years ago when they locked in their mortgages. As I mentioned earlier, mortgages back then, 30-year fixed rate could be below 3%, right? Today, if they were to buy a home or sell a home and put their house on the market, they are concerned that they may not be able to lock in with they will have to lock in with a higher rate. Some of them are concerned about that, and that's the mortgage lock-in effect. And of course, some of them also are concerned about the current inventory level. If they were to put their house up on the market, they may not be able to buy another home because they couldn't find one. So that's one of the concerns. Now another concern that we don't talk about as much is the change in the demographics. This is a national slide that looks at different generations: millennial, Gen X, and baby boomers. If you compare the Gen X and the baby boomers, you can see that Gen X look a little bit less than what we have as a population for baby boomers. In fact, that is the case. I think Gen X is a smaller group in terms of population compared to baby boomers. So what happened is, baby boomers 10, 15 years ago, they were in the prime age of being homeowners or being trade-up buyers, between 30 to 40 years old. That's the age group that's the prime age group for trade-up buyers. Baby boomers, of course, moved on 15 years from back then. They moved on. They're not in the prime age anymore, but the Gen X is. Prime age of trade-up buyers. Let me clarify. They're not in the prime age of trade-up buyers anymore. Who are in the prime age of trade-up buyers? The Gen X. Well, right now it's the Gen X. And I mentioned earlier, because Gen X is a smaller group of population. So when you have a smaller group of population in 30 to 40, that means you have a smaller group of trade-up buyers. When you have a smaller group of trade-up buyers, that means you have fewer properties being put up on the market. That's one of the reasons why we have inventory constraint. But not only that, yes, Gen X are in the prime age group, but remember also we have a loss of population in the Gen X, but we also have a loss of home ownership. In early 2000s, some of the Gen X purchased properties, and of course, what happened in 2008? Some of them lost their home. So you have a loss of home ownership in that particular generation as well. So when you have a loss of population and when you have a loss of home ownership in that particular age group, 30 to 40, of course you're going to have fewer inventory. You're going to have fewer trade-up buyers, and you have fewer properties being put up on the market to be traded. So what's going to happen? Are we going to have this inventory issues for the next few years? Well, most likely we will have some inventory constraint, but we probably will have some rescue, believe it or not, from the millennials. Because in 2009, 2010, when the economy was not doing great, the two years prior, in 2009, 2010, the national government and the state government did something that benefited home buyers. Do you remember what it was? The first-time buyer tax credit. So a lot of first-time buyers actually purchased property in 2009 and 2010. And many of those first-time buyers could be millennials. So the first batch of first-time buyers, millennial first-time buyers, could be coming onto the market, because how long do you usually stay in your entry-level home?
7 years.
6 years, 7 years. So 2009 was 6 years ago, right? So we're about to see our first batch of first-time buyers and millennial coming onto the market. And